Thank you. So as Jesse mentioned, we are going to be talking about sleep and athletic performance today. And even though sleep isn't necessarily an exact nutrition topic, there are definitely some aspects of nutrition that impact sleep and vice versa. And it is so important to prioritize sleep as a piece of your performance plan, because without it, a lot of the other areas we focus on aren't going to be as effective. So today, the first half of this presentation, we're going to review the importance of sleep and really the science of sleep. So how your sleep habits can be helping or hurting you and what is so important about sleep. And then the second half of this presentation, we're going to talk more about the nutrition aspect of this and ways that nutrition can support or be hurting your sleep depending on what your nutrition habits are, and how that can play a role in your performance goals. So here, if we look at this little graphic, we think about a lot of these components as different areas of preparation, right? So we think about hydrating. I hope you're thinking about hydrating after our last talk. We think about hydrating as something that can help you with preparation. We think about strength training and conditioning as something that can help get you ready. Sometimes we'll think about nutrition or mental preparation, but a lot of times we forget about sleep. And it is so important to get not only enough quantity, but also enough quality of sleep to make sure that you can recover and perform at your very best. So I also want to make sure that when we're talking about sleep today, we are definitely going to focus on sleep and how it impacts your performance in sport, but we also want to focus on sleep and how it impacts your performance in life. So every time that we're talking about sleep today, I want you to think about how is this impacting my sport and how is this impacting my life, because sleep is definitely going to impact both of those equally. So I have our first poll for you guys. Does that show up for everyone? Oh, I have to launch it. Does that show up for everyone? Okay, so I want you guys to go ahead and tell me, on average, how many hours of sleep are you getting per night? Is it 5 hours or less, 6 to 7 hours, 8 to 9, or 9 plus? I think I'm missing 3 of you. 9, 10. We're good. Okay, so you guys, let me share these results with you. You guys said that on average, you are getting 6 to 7 hours of sleep a night. There are 2 of you that are getting 8 to 9, and we talk about this more. I can tell you that with 6 to 7 hours a night, you're falling right in line with a lot of college athletes. We're going to talk about this when we talk about some research today. So keep that number in mind. A lot of getting 6 to 7 hours. So before I get into the science of sleep, I want to talk about how much you should be getting. And why won't it pull up? There we go. Polling. So this is my next poll for you. True or false? Student athletes need more sleep than the average student. So most of you guys got this one. Student athletes do need more sleep than the average student. We're going to talk a lot about this today, but given the timing of practices, travel and competition, everything that goes into being a student athlete, you're going to have a higher risk for sleep deficits and difficulties than just the average student. So think about all the extra time demands that are placed on you just because of practice or workouts or any like film reviews that you might be doing, and think about how you have to balance that academic side with the athletic side. And so this balance can really reduce your sleep opportunity. So you might not have as much time in the day to get that quality sleep. But as an athlete, you're going to need more sleep than the average student because your body is undergoing more stress and more pressure than the average student as well. So like we said in the poll, it is a fact. Student athletes need more sleep than the average student, and student athletes need 8 to 10 hours a night. So the general recommendation for just the normal student population would be 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. You guys as athletes are going to need 8 to 10. The reason for this is that athletes tend to train harder than the average student. So like I mentioned, you guys have practices and workouts, and all of that adds up as stress in your body that you need to repair and recover from. And those additional hours of sleep are going to be required for that proper recovery. So keep in mind, you need 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. I know a lot of you mentioned that you're not getting that currently. Most of you said 6 to 7 hours. So go ahead and throw it in the chat. I want to kind of talk about this. What are some reasons that you are struggling to get that recommended 8 to 10? Why are you not getting adequate sleep at night? Homework. That's a big one. Same. I really want to relax after working all day, so I run out of time. That's a common one. So it's sounding like wanting to relax and taking time for yourself and doing homework are some of the most common responses here. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys what some other student athletes have said that they struggle with. So maybe not so much in the high school population, but especially as you continue on to college or professional athletics, traveling across time zones is a big one that impacts sleep goals and meeting those sleep goals in athletes. Late competitions. I'm sure that you guys have all experienced this at some point in your life where it either gets delayed or you just have a late start. And so you're not finishing that game until 8, 9, or 10 p.m. at night. Time management. So this kind of plays a role with both of those things that you guys mentioned. So homework and wanting to take time for yourself, and how do we manage that? Early morning training. So especially if you have workouts at like 6 in the morning, if you're struggling to get to bed at night, now you're not getting that adequate amount of sleep. Anxiety about competition. This one is one that people don't often talk about, but it's very, very common. And I really want to destigmatize this. A lot of athletes experience anxiety about competition, and so they'll be laying awake the night before a game and not able to sleep because they're so stressed about it. And a lot of athletes don't want to admit this and don't want to admit that they are feeling anxious. But this is something that a lot of people struggle with. And so it's something that we definitely need to discuss in college athletics and high school athletics. And then academic demands. You guys have a lot of homework, I'm sure. And so this is another area that can really inhibit your ability to get as much sleep as you want to in a normal night. So all of these are specifically related to challenges created by competing in sport. So this is why it can be even more difficult to get this sleep as a student athlete. Additional challenges outside of just your sport might be social schedules. So especially if you think about the weekends, you might be spending more time with friends. Family obligations. So if there's like a birthday or a holiday that you're going to go spend more time with family, and that might cut into sleep. And other extracurriculars. I'm sure there are a lot of you that don't just compete in sports outside of school, that you're a part of different clubs that are also taking up time in your day. So making sleep a priority can help student athletes to better manage your time and your stress. This is one of those tricky catch-22s that if we are sleep deprived, it tends to increase our stress levels, which then makes it harder to fall asleep. So if we go back to this anxiety piece, if we're feeling really stressed, it can be more difficult to fall asleep and stay asleep. And so we get into this negative feedback loop where we're not sleeping well, so that makes us stressed, which makes us not sleep well, which makes us more stressed, which makes us not sleep well. And so what my goal from today is to help reverse that into a positive feedback loop, that we're sleeping well, which is making us perform well, and feel well, which is making us sleep well. And so we want to change this negative loop into a positive one. So my recommendation, we're going to talk more about some other recommendations, but when it comes to changing this loop into a positive one and looking at some of these challenges, I have some thoughts about times to go to bed. So just like you can set an alarm clock to wake up, you can also set an alarm clock for when to go to bed. And this can help you with getting on a routine. So a lot of phones have it that it's like a bedtime timer, and it'll go off when it's your bedtime. So if you say, I always want to go to bed at 10 p.m., your phone will have an alarm that will go off at 10 p.m. and you know that it's time for me to start getting ready. If you want to go to bed by 10, you probably need to set it by 9:30 though. So having a regular and consistent bedtime schedule can really be helpful, and doing the same tasks. So I'm always going to brush my teeth. I'm always going to wash my face. I'm always going to, journal before bed, whatever that might be, but doing those same things consistently can really help with getting yourself ready for bed. My other recommendation is to not spend too much time in front of screens before bedtime. We're going to talk about this more, but too much screen time can really inhibit your body's ability to feel ready for sleep and produce a hormone that we call melatonin that helps your mind get ready for bed. And so if you're just scrolling through Instagram or social media, that can really prevent your body from releasing the hormones that it needs to get ready for bed. So instead of being on your phone before bedtime, I recommend finding other things that you find enjoyable. So that might be reading or journaling. Some people like meditation. I know the Calm app is something that's really popular right now. And so listening to some of those calm stories might be something that you would find beneficial for you to help get you to sleep better. All right, so here's another chat for you. What are some things that you feel when you don't get enough sleep? So what are some symptoms you notice when you're not getting enough sleep? How does that make you feel? Lack of focus, headaches, tired and impatient? Yes to all of the above. Anyone else have some thoughts? Same? I feel like those are usually the ones we think of, right? Easily angered. Yep. So you guys are right on the money. So if we go through these one by one, the first one's fatigue. You guys mentioned that, of feeling tired. And this one, once again, we're talking about how this impacts you in sport and in life. So if you're feeling fatigued through the day, you're probably not going to be performing at your best on the court or on the field. And you're probably also going to be falling asleep during class, which isn't going to help you to perform in your academic studies. Irritability is another one that you guys mentioned. So if we go back to that negative feedback loop, being sleep deprived causes stress. And when you're really stressed, that makes you more irritable. And I know I personally tend to have a very short fuse when I'm sleep deprived, and I can just snap on someone the way that I normally wouldn't if I had enough sleep. So aside from how this might impact you in sport, this is also going to impact things like your relationships. So think about making sure you get enough sleep so that you can have really good friendships. It's also going to impact hunger. So we release specific stress hormones. So once again, going back to that stress, your body releases specific stress hormones in response to this lack of sleep, and it makes you feel hungrier. And it also changes kind of how you think about food. And so this is why when we're really stressed or we're really sleep deprived, we tend to go for things like cookies and candy and cake and things that are really, really high in sugar, because your body is craving those as a result of this stress hormone. A lot of times it's also difficult to listen to those hunger cues when we are in this sleep deprived state. And so you can have a tendency to just like continue snacking and snacking and snacking. You've probably experienced this if you've ever stayed up really, really late, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., that your body just wants to keep snacking on these really high sugar foods. And that's your body's way of trying to stay awake and stay alert. Another thing is forgetfulness. So this on the court or on the field could impact your ability to remember plays or remember what your coach is wanting you to do. In your line of study, this would make it really difficult to perform well on tests, because anything you study, you're probably not going to be remembering as well. We're going to talk a lot about this in the next few slides. And then also lack of focus, one of you mentioned. This can make it even harder to study and to remember plays or pay attention when either your teacher or your coach is talking to you. So think about when you're trying to read and you just find yourself reading the same page over and over, but you didn't actually absorb it. That's one example of that lack of focus. So some of the effects of inadequate sleep, specifically on performance, notice a lot of these are very similar to the effects of dehydration. And so this is why it's so important to pay attention to all of the aspects of recovery that were on that initial circle slide. Because if we are staying well hydrated, but we're not getting enough sleep, we're still going to see poor decision making, which is both of those things. Really important to make sure we're taking care of aspects of recovery and preparation for performance. So I would see a decrease in coordination action when you're sleep deprived, make you not as effective on the field. We are decision making, which not as quick at making those decisions. So you might miss a pass or pass something too late. And this also can lead you to not make the best decisions. So think of this as mental mistakes. If you've ever been in your sport and you make just like a really dumb mental mistake, you're like, oh, why did I foul that person? That can be a result of inadequate sleep. Decreased accuracy. I have a lot of fun statistics coming up on this one, so we'll talk about that in future slides. Impaired memory. So like I just discussed, we're not going to be retaining that information as well, and that can really impact your studies. So this one's really important for the classroom. And one thing to keep in mind with this one is the way that we study for tests. So I know, especially at the college level, a lot of my student athletes will tell me, oh, I only slept 2 hours last night because I was up all night cramming for this test. Studies are really showing that pulling that all-nighter is not going to be the best way to prep for an exam. We're going to talk about this in future slides as well. But if you're ever tempted to cram for an exam, I hope you remember this slide. Don't do it. It's not the best way to remember information. There's also an increased perceived exertion by 17 to 19%. So if you were here for our talk on hydration, you might remember I had that little guy running on the treadmill and he was just really struggling. And there was the other girl on the treadmill next to him and she was just cruising through her run. That's perceived exertion. So the guy who was really struggling might have been sleep deprived. And so it just felt harder to complete the same amount of work as the girl who was next to him on the other treadmill. Another thing that we don't commonly think about, but it definitely happens, is injury. There is a correlation between sleep loss and an increased risk for injury. We think that this is a result of that impaired reaction time and that poor decision making. So you're moving slower and you're making worse decisions, and that combination can lead to an injury. So think if you're running down the field in soccer, you make a poor decision to pass too late, and you also aren't paying attention to the field in front of you, and now you trip in a hole and you sprain your ankle. That would be an example of how this might increase your risk for injury. And then decreased performance in the classroom. So you can see how all of these things would impact your performance in school. And if you're looking to compete at that next level, I can tell you academics are so, so important. And so making sure you get that aspect and taken care of is to really be key to success in athletics. And no one really likes to talk this, so unlikely that you're an athlete as your career for your entire life. There are very few people who are professional athletes in their 50s and 60s. So make sure you're taking care of that academic piece as well so that you can rely on your academics when that athletic career is finally over. I know that's not something people really like to talk about. So here's my fun fact about extending your sleep. So there was a study done at Stanford, not too far from you, that looked at the benefits of extending sleep. And so they looked at NCAA basketball players. So this was men's college basketball, and they were sleeping for 6 to 9 hours each night. So they polled every athlete on that team, and it was between 6 to 9 hours. So right where you guys are. You guys tend to be in that 6 to 7 hour range. And for the duration of the study, which was 5 to 7 weeks, they had them increase their sleep by 2 hours. So for the individuals that were getting 6 hours, they're now getting 8 hours. And on average, most of the people, once they increased their sleep, were getting 8.5 hours each night. Here is what they found. So they found that across the board, there were improvements in sprint times, self-ratings of fatigue, so people weren't feeling as tired, and performance during practices and games. They specifically found a 9% increase in free throw accuracy and a 9.2% increase in 3-point percentage. If you play basketball, increasing your three-point percentage by 9% is huge. And if you could do this not just in one individual, but across your entire team, we're not just winning games by 3 points anymore. We're winning games by like 20, 30 points and just having complete blowouts. So the fact that they were able to find this just from changing sleep habits is phenomenal. They also did a similar study in tennis players. So once again, at the college level, they looked at tennis players and they found the same things, that they increased sprint test times, they saw a decrease in fatigue, and they saw a 36 to 41% increase in serving accuracy, which is also huge. If you go from losing points because your serve isn't getting in the box to increasing that by almost 50%, you're now winning a lot more matches just because you're not losing those simple points, which also goes back to those mental mistakes. Like, we're not missing those simple things that we could easily fix. So once again, I want to go back to the chat. After hearing this, what are some things that you think you could change about your own habits to make some more time for a full 8 to 10 hours of sleep each night? What are some things that you think might be holding you back that could easily be changed? Nobody? There's nothing that you could change? All right, I'll give you one. One thing that would be easy to change is your social media usage. There we go. Stop using electronics right before bed. Yes. So if you can decrease your social media and stop using electronics right before bed, that is one easy change. You would be amazed at how you can lose just staring at that screen. The next time you log on to Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever platform you're using, I want you to set a timer before you log on and pay attention to how much time you actually spend on there, because you might be surprised that it starts to be 30, 40, 50 minutes that you're just scrolling mindlessly through these things. Another way that you could change this is using your windfalls of time better. So what I mean by windfalls of time is, if there's a task that you could do in under 10 minutes and you have 10 minutes, just do it. Things like folding the laundry, or putting away the dishes that your mom asked you to put away, or even if it's just starting on your homework. If you can do 10-minute chunks of homework in the time that you have, 10 minutes, you will find that all of a sudden when it's bedtime, you only have like 2 math problems left as opposed to the entire assignment. So this is a great way to improve your sleep quality and benefit from extending your sleep. My other recommendation is what I was saying earlier, is setting that sleep alarm. A lot of times, like I was saying with social media, we just get caught up in what we're doing and we don't realize how late it is. I'm sure that you've done this before, where you plan to go to bed early and then you got busy doing something and you looked at the clock and you said, oh shoot, it's already 11. How did that happen? And so if you can set that alarm, that'll give you a hard stop to say, okay, whatever I'm doing, I need to set it aside because it is now time for bed. So those are 3 really easy recommendations. I want you to kind of assess your own life and where you might be spending some of your time, and think about some other ways that you could cut some things out to make more time to extend your sleep. When it comes to strength and sleep, the majority of muscle repair and growth is going to happen during sleep. The reason for this is that sleep is when a lot of our muscular repair and growth hormones are released. And so if we don't have adequate sleep, our muscle gains and growth are really going to be diminished. So the specific hormone that's released is called human growth hormone, and it increases muscle building capacity. For short, we call this one HGH. It's not as popular in females as it is with males, but this is what a lot of people will inject in the form of steroids to make their muscles big and strong. I'm not recommending steroids. In fact, the exact opposite. I'm recommending that you get adequate sleep so you can have adequate normal HGH secretion in your body. I'm also not saying that getting adequate sleep and having more HGH is going to make you bulky. A lot of times we tend to associate more muscle with bulk. If you're releasing adequate HGH, you are not going to get bulky. I want you to think powerful. This is going to help those muscles repair and recover and be more powerful. It's not going to make you look like a man. So we really want to make sure we're getting adequate sleep so we can repair adequately and get as much power as we possibly can. So those HGH levels in your blood while you're sleeping are going to be highest about 2 hours after you fall asleep. And this is also going to increase your muscles' ability to absorb protein. So if you eat protein before bed, your muscles are going to be absorbing that protein best about 2 hours after you fall asleep. So we need to make sure that we're eating adequately paired with our sleep so that we can make sure we're getting the most out of our sleep and our nutrition. Okay, so this slide I know looks like a lot initially, but we're gonna go through it, and this is one that I hope sticks with you for life. So everyone, when we talk about sleep, likes to talk about REM sleep. That's the one that you hear most often. So that one's over here. But people rarely talk about these other 4 stages, and that's what I wanna go through today. So these other 4 stages are your non-REM sleep. So here we have stage 1. This is your interim between consciousness and sleep. So this is what it feels like when you start nodding off in class, or maybe even this presentation. Think about that kid that's like, you know, doing one of these and like catching themselves back awake. That's that stage 1 where you're really in between consciousness and falling asleep. Once we get through stage 1, we get into stage 2 where your heart rate slows down and your brain is going to do less complicated tasks. And this is where brain recovery begins. So I want you to think of this like emptying the trash can of your brain. All day long, your brain is collecting information. So I see right now that Jessie is wearing a green shirt, and that I have this cute little muscle emoji on here, and that I have a blue cup next to me. And so I'm collecting all of this information throughout the day, but really, it doesn't matter if I know that Jessie's wearing a green shirt. So that's not information that my brain needs. But it does matter that I remember all of this information that I'm learning on this slide. And so those are things that my brain wants to maintain, compress, and turn into a memory. If we don't get adequate sleep at night, we're not going through that process. And we end up getting clogged with all the details that we don't need because you're not able to empty that trash can and get rid of the fact that Jessie has a green shirt. So you want to be able to empty that trash can at the end of each day so you can get rid of the useless details that you don't really need and compress the ones that you do need and want to keep. So if we don't empty the trash can at the end of each day, we're going to be really stressed with all of this overwhelming information that's floating around in our brain. And it's going to be really difficult to pull the memories that we want and sort them from the pieces of information that we really don't care about. So this is where you start to become more stressed and irritable and angry because you can't find the information you need, and your brain is just feeling really overwhelmed with everything that it's got inside of it. So this stage 2 is really one of the most important stages of sleep because we need to make sure we're taking care of that brain. Stage 3 is when we finally get into deep sleep. So stages 1 and 2 are a light sleep. You could easily be woken up. Stage 3 is where we're finally getting into deep sleep, and this is where your body is starting to make repairs. So this is our muscle building and recovery phase. So as an athlete, we want to make sure that we're spending a lot of time in this phase, and this is also what's going to help with reducing muscle soreness. So if you think about working out, every time you work out, you're going to break down those muscles. And if you are getting into this stage 3 of sleep at night, you're going to help with repairing those. And the more you can repair them, the less soreness you're going to feel that next day. So you can come back bigger, better, stronger for that next practice or game. So we want to get as many cycles as we can in this phase to meet our athletic goals. Stage 4 is also a deep state of sleep. And this is kind of where you might start drooling. So we're like really in that deep, relaxed state. So think of this as like the drooling stage. Research really shows that stages 3 and 4 both support muscle growth and hormone release. So like I was talking about with HGH in that last slide, this is really where that HGH starts to get secreted. And this is where we're going to start taking in proteins from our diet and using those to support muscle building in our bodies. So in these stages is where we're rapidly absorbing those proteins. And even though it seems like a crazy thing, I'm sure your grandma or someone older in your life has told you, you should have a warm glass of milk to help you go to bed. You ever heard that before? So even though this is kind of like a weird cliche in society, there's actually some truth behind it. That if we have something like a warm glass of milk that would have protein in it, that can help us with building and repairing muscles because we now have protein available for stages 3 and 4. Finally, we make it to stage 5, which is what everyone talks about, rapid eye movement. This one usually gets the most attention because it's where dreaming occurs. So in this state, you lose muscle tone, which is why you can dream and you think that you're running in your dream, but you don't actually run in bed. So think of this as an activated brain and a paralyzed body. So all your muscles are kind of shut off. They're not going to be doing their thing, but your brain is really active, and that's what's causing you to dream. So if you're sleeping for a full 8 hours, you're going to continue to go through this cycle. So in 8 hours, you should go through this complete cycle about 4 to 5 times. So if you're only sleeping for 6 hours, you're only going through this cycle maybe 2 to 3 times. So this is why it's important to get those full 8 to 10 hours of sleep, because the more times we can go through this cycle, the more we can empty that brain trash can, and the more we can help with that muscle building and recovery. Okay, so before I go any further, that was the first half of this presentation talking about, the science of sleep, the background of sleep, why it's so important. Next, we're going to talk more about nutrition, but I want to pause here and see if anyone has any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself and shout it out. You don't have to put it in the chat if you don't want to.
I'll let others.
I see one question here. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I had asked a question in the chat, but if anyone else has a question first, feel free to ask. Otherwise, you can answer it.
So it sounds like no one else has questions. So I'll go ahead and answer this question in the chat. How long before bed should you eat your dinner? So we're actually going to talk about that coming up, about snacks. Dinner can be at a variety of times. So like I mentioned with sports, sometimes you might not get done with competition until 8, 9, or 10 p.m. So I'd expect that dinner would probably be after that, right? So dinner doesn't always have to be at a set time, but you should be eating dinner at least an hour to 2 hours before bed, because if we're too full, that's another thing that can really impact your sleep quality. But we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Okay, if no one has any other questions, I'll keep moving. If you think of anything, feel free to throw it in the chat and I can come back to it. So on this slide, we're talking about casein specifically, and it's okay if you don't remember this name, but dairy has specific proteins in it, and one of them is called casein. So casein is a protein that is found in dairy products. And the thing that's cool about casein is that it breaks down really slowly in our body, and that slow breakdown can match up with that third stage of sleep that releases that HGH hormone that increases your body's ability to intake proteins. So if we are eating dairy before bed that has a slow releasing protein, that protein is now available to your muscles to be consumed during that sleep cycle, which is a really cool thing to think about. If you don't do dairy, that's totally okay. It doesn't mean that if you're not getting casein, you don't get the benefits of stage 3 of sleep. But this is one thing, if you do eat dairy, might be something to consider adding to that nighttime snack or even dinner, depending on the timing. So that could be milk. Here we have some cottage cheese with fruit. It could be cheese or even yogurt. Those would be some good sources of casein that would allow for that uptake of proteins in your muscles. This is where I wanted to talk about timing a little bit further. So I know there's a lot of information floating around in society that you shouldn't eat after a specific time. So some people will say you shouldn't eat after 6, you shouldn't eat after 7, you shouldn't eat after 8. And I really want to throw that one out the window. So that is just an arbitrary time that is set out there for a variety of reasons. But if you're hungry at 8 or 9 or 10 p.m., you should honor that feeling in your body and have a snack. So really the important thing when it comes to timing is listening to your body. And when we're talking about sleep and promoting sleep and repair during sleep, that snack should include some type of protein in it. So make sure that if you're having either dinner or a night snack before bed, that it's not just vegetables or it's not just popcorn, that it also includes some type of protein. I notice there's another question in here about casein. Unfortunately, casein is only found in dairy products. It's not found in other proteins. But like I said, if you don't do dairy, that's okay. This is more of just like it's really cool in science that this specific protein lines up perfectly with our ability to absorb proteins at night. But we're going to talk about other proteins that you can eat. So don't worry if you don't eat dairy, you're not going to be missing out. The biggest thing is to make sure that you are supporting your body by eating those proteins so that it can uptake what it needs while you're sleeping to support that repair and recovery during sleep. So it's okay. If your basketball game ends at 7 p.m., you can eat dinner at 8 or 9. I don't want anyone here to think that they can't eat after a certain time of day. Okay, so now that we've talked a lot about foods that can help with sleep, I want to spend a little time on foods and medications to avoid. So I have another poll for you. I can get it up. All right, so you'll notice the first thing on my list here is caffeine. So I want to know, do you guys drink coffee regularly? What I mean by regularly is at least one time per week. Okay, the results are in. Awesome. So looks like most of you don't, which is really great because like I said, this is on my list of things to avoid. That doesn't mean that you can't drink coffee ever. So caffeine does have some benefits, especially when we talk about performance. It can help with being an extra stimulus, but this is only a short-term benefit. And so caffeine can help with increasing alertness, but oftentimes we feel a crash as the effects of caffeine wear off. So the best way to benefit from consuming something like coffee or a different caffeine source would be to consume small amounts. So instead of having like a really tall, like big coffee from Starbucks, having like the little 8-ounce mug would be a better way to consume caffeine. And then also making sure that you're not consuming caffeine late at night or even in the afternoon. So caffeine can last in your body up to 6 to 9 hours, depending on how you specifically metabolize caffeine. And so 6 to 9 hours after you drink it, it could still be impacting your system. So if you're drinking anything that contains caffeine, which doesn't just have to be coffee, this could be like green tea also has caffeine, black tea has caffeine. So if you're drinking like boba drinks, a lot of those have caffeine as well. And that can be impacting your system for 6 to 9 hours. So if you have this at noon, it could still be impacting you at 6 or 9 p.m., which could prevent you from being able to fall asleep as easily. So try to avoid and minimize caffeine use really after noon to 2. That's really the cutoff for caffeine. Sounds like none of you are really big caffeine drinkers, but if you are someone who does feel like you need caffeine to wake up or to stay awake, this is a Band-Aid, and I really want us to avoid Band-Aids. So if this is something that you're feeling, you should really try to address the underlying problem instead of covering that issue up with a Band-Aid. So it might be that you're not getting enough sleep. You're only sleeping 6 hours, or that your sleep environment isn't great. So you're always waking up during the night and not getting that quality sleep. So if that's something that you find yourself struggling with, go back to the reasons why sleep is important and how we can promote healthy sleep rather than covering it up with caffeine. All right, I think I already know the answer to this next question based on your answers about caffeine, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it. Do you ever drink energy drinks? Okay, I think we have everyone. So yeah, this is what I was expecting based on your caffeine results. So most of you say no, one of you said yes. So when you're consuming energy drinks, it would have a similar aspect to caffeine or coffee, which energy drinks are typically a combination of caffeine and sugar, which can cause those significant spikes and then also drops. A lot of these energy drinks can also have some really dangerous levels of caffeine that can put extra stress on your heart. So a normal cup of coffee doesn't have a lot of caffeine in it. But if you were to have an energy drink, sometimes those can be the equivalent of 2, 3, 4, or even more cups of coffee. So I would really avoid energy drinks if at all possible. The other reason that energy drinks don't work when it comes to sleep is because it's just a Band-Aid. So once again, if you're tired and you can't get through the day without having some type of caffeine or energy drink, we really need to consider how much sleep you're getting. And you'd also consider how much fuel you're getting. If we're really crashing at 3 p.m., is it because you missed lunch or you didn't have adequate calories in your lunch? Is it because you missed breakfast? What are the reasons why you're feeling that crash? So that's what I really go back to rather than continuing to Band-Aid the issue with caffeine through coffee, energy drinks, teas, whatever that might be. So next on this slide, I know you guys are not of age to drink, but the reason I left alcohol on here is because there will come a day that you are. And I hope that you can remember this fun little tidbit about alcohol. I think that it's something that no one really tells you. And so there's a lot of misconceptions about it. So I want to make sure you're all educated so that the day when you are old enough to drink, you can make this educated decision. So many people will use alcohol as a way to fall asleep. So I'm sure a lot of you have experienced this, that you maybe have a parent or someone else in your life who will come home after a day at work and will have like a glass of wine before bed or a glass of wine with dinner, or maybe a beer or some other alcoholic beverage. And they'll say that this can help them fall asleep. This is really unfortunate because alcohol is a poor sleep aid. So alcohol can help the body to relax and fall asleep in the short term. But if we go back to that sleep cycle that we were talking about, it's going to disrupt your sleep over the course of the night, and it can prevent you from getting into stages 3, 4, and 5 of sleep. And so this is why some of those individuals who will have, even if it's just one glass of wine or one beer, they won't feel really rested that next morning. So like I said, I know this does not apply to you at this exact moment, but I hope you remember this years down the road. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that one alcoholic drink is going to help you to rest and feel better the next day. It actually has the opposite effect and can prevent you from going to those deep stages of sleep. So there are much better ways to find a way to relax before bed. The last one on this slide is melatonin, which we're going to talk about more in the next slide. But this is a sleep medication that you would commonly hear about. This one is also a Band-Aid solution. So melatonin is naturally produced in our bodies, similar to that HGH. It's a hormone that naturally comes out, and it's produced to help us feel sleepy. So when you start yawning and it's dark and you're just feeling cozy and sleepy, that's a result of melatonin being released in large quantities in your brain. And so we want to try to increase the amount of melatonin that's released, but we want to do it naturally. If you start taking melatonin in a pill form, you can start developing dependence on that melatonin. So I don't recommend taking any melatonin supplements unless it's something that you've already discussed with a physician. So really, we want to try to focus on natural ways to fall asleep and natural ways to stay awake. So a natural way to stay awake is getting enough sleep, getting enough food, and eating at the right times of day. And then for natural ways to fall asleep, instead of turning to something like melatonin, I want you to first consider your sleep area. So making sure that you're in an environment that's dark, cool, comfortable, quiet, and avoiding things like that blue light that will prevent the release of melatonin and prevent you from going to bed. So that's where that phone use can be really damaging before bed, because it prevents your brain from releasing as much melatonin as you need, and it prevents you from feeling sleepy. So a little bit more on the science behind this. Melatonin, like I mentioned, is made in your brain, and it's the thing that makes you feel sleepy. And the way it does this is it converts a specific chemical called hormone to serotonin. I don't care if you remember the words tryptophan, serotonin, melatonin. It's okay if you don't remember that. The thing that's important to remember is that these things are released before bed, and blue light is something that can inhibit it, and certain foods can help increase it. So we're going to talk in just a second about some of those foods that can help increase it. Another component that can be helpful with falling asleep is magnesium. So magnesium helps increase the receptors that block different impulses in your brain that can help your body relax. So like I was talking about in that last slide about alcohol, some people say alcohol helps them relax. Well, really, magnesium is the thing that we want to help us relax. And this is found in a lot of different foods. The third component that can help with promoting sleep is carbohydrates. And this helps to make that tryptophan that I was talking about over here more available to the brain. Even though it's a really big word, you've probably heard the word tryptophan before because it's the component in turkey that makes people say turkey makes you tired. So if you have a turkey sandwich for lunch, you're not necessarily going to fall asleep in your next class, but that turkey can help a sleepy brain fall asleep better. So if it's 9 o'clock at night and you're already feeling sleepy, the tryptophan in that turkey can help that sleepy brain get to bed easier. So it's okay if you have a turkey sandwich and you're not trying to fall asleep, but this is one of those food components that can help you to fall asleep easier. So here is a list of some different foods. So going back to that casein found in milk and dairy products, that is one great food that you could have in a night snack that would help you with falling asleep. But look at all of these other foods that are available, even if you don't eat dairy. And to answer this question in the chat, even if you have a competition later in the evening, it's okay if you have turkey because you're probably so jazzed up from those endorphins and you're ready to go that your brain's not going to be impacted by that tryptophan. So don't worry about turkey. But even if you don't do dairy, that's totally okay. So different fruits, so things like bananas, grapes, cherries, strawberries, those all have some of those components that we were talking about. So you'll notice the word magnesium in here. Bananas are high in magnesium, which is something we were talking about on the last slide, can help you relax. Some of these different fruits are going to be high in melatonin. So that's another word from that last slide. And those can also help you with getting ready to go to bed and feeling sleepy. Different nuts are great options as well. They contain both melatonin and magnesium as well as that tryptophan. So once again, if you have like trail mix, it's not necessarily going to make you tired, but if you're already sleepy, this is a thing that could help you with going to bed. If you don't do dairy and you're looking for a different high protein option, really any of the meat options are good. You could also do eggs, soybeans, sesame seeds. Those are also going to be rich in that tryptophan. So really, as long as you're eating like a whole healthful diet, you really can't go wrong in terms of foods that are going to help you fall asleep. So some good snack ideas that I have for you guys would be like yogurt and bananas. You could make yourself a little parfait before bed. Or you could do milk with some walnuts or milk and some trail mix. You could do cheese and grapes. So now you're pairing the casein from that cheese with some of the other components found in fruits such as grapes. You could do a turkey sandwich, since we've talked about turkey so much. You could also do like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So all of these would be really great night snack options. So like I said before, if you're feeling hungry at 8, 9, 10 p.m., go ahead and honor that and have one of these really great snack options. So here I want to leave you with kind of a checklist of things to go over to make sure that you're creating an environment that's going to help you with falling asleep and staying asleep, both in terms of your physical environment as well as your nutritional environment. And I did steal this slide, so I am going to explain it because there are things in here like Celsius that I'm sure aren't into it. So the first thing is environment. So make sure you're not in a noisy area. If you do have a lot of noise around your bedroom, that might mean turning on some background noise. So like I was mentioning, that Calm app has a lot of sleep stories. So you can have something else that you can focus your hearing on. Or some people like to sleep with a fan on at night, and that can help with some background noise to drown out the other noises that you don't want to hear. This is also really important to make sure that you keep your cell phone off so we're not waking up to buzzes or alerts, things like that. Number 2 is maintaining a room temperature that's comfortable. 18 degrees Celsius is 64 degrees Fahrenheit. So it should be a little bit chilly. Like you should want to snuggle under your blankets. If you're too hot and sweaty, you're not going to have very great sleep because you're constantly going to be wanting to push blankets off of yourself. Number 3 is to ensure that bedding and clothing don't cause an environment that's too hot. So if you're sleeping in long sleeve pajamas and we're going through a heat wave, you're probably not going to be very comfortable. So pick the right clothing that's going to fit with what you need. Number 4, like we discussed, is a sleep routine. So find a consistent time each night for falling asleep and find a consistent time for waking up. And that's where setting that bedtime alarm might be really helpful. Number 5 is avoiding caffeine. So this doesn't just have to be coffee, but as we discussed, this could be tea, this could be boba, this could be soda, anything that's going to contain caffeine, we should definitely avoid before bed. And I really recommend avoiding anytime after 2 p.m. You also want to avoid food and fluid. So this doesn't mean that you can't have snacks ever, but this is what I was talking about in terms of that meal. If we have that full meal right before bed, you might be feeling way too full to sleep well. And if you drink a lot of fluid right before bed, you're going to be waking up in the middle of the night to pee. So find a comfortable amount to eat. And then this little parentheses about no nap. You could eat a full meal before a nap, or you could have a lot of fluid before a nap because you're probably not going to be asleep very long. And so you could easily wake up and go pee after a nap. Number 6 is avoiding the use of a computer or a tablet or a TV. As we discussed with that blue light, it's really going to inhibit your ability to release those sleep hormones that are going to make you feel sleepy and want to go to sleep. Number 7 is not napping late in the afternoon. So if you're taking a nap at usually it's 4 or later, that can inhibit your ability to fall asleep. So we want to take naps earlier in the day. I know in the high school environment that can be difficult. So maybe like right after class when you get home and you took a nap, that would be an appropriate time. But really, if you're taking like a nap after dinner, you're probably going to be inhibiting your sleep. Number 8, you can see they say at least 7 hours of sleep, but you guys are athletes, so you need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So pay attention to this little bubble, not number 8. We want 8 to 10 hours of sleep for you guys to make sure you're getting enough. And then the last one here is ensure you have a dark room with no light. So if you have a lot of light coming in through your windows, try to get some curtains. And if you have that phone on, that screen's going to be flashing if you get any notifications. So make sure that you leave your phone away from your bed so you can get quality sleep. So this is everything I had for you in terms of my presentation, but please, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat or shout them out if you want.